Montreal, November 26, 1984. A man steps into a small apartment and places a VCR on the table. He doesn't talk, doesn't stay, he just walks out and disappears into the cold. That night, 4 bikers gather inside the apartment. They press play on the VCR. 16 kilos of C4 explode, leveling the entire room and leaving nothing behind but ash and teeth fragments. Police were sure it was gang retaliation, but what confused them wasn't the motive, it was the method. This wasn't sloppy, it was engineered, like something out of a military manual. And whoever built it left no trace. Within a year, the man behind that bombing would calmly confess to 53 murders. But at the time of the explosion, not even the detectives investigating the scene knew his real name. His brothers in the Hells Angels called him Apache, but no one really knew who he was. He didn't wear tattoos. He didn't chase power. He didn't raise his voice. To them, he wasn't a member. He was a tool, sharpened, cold, and always on standby. And when he turned, he didn't just give police names. He gave them blueprints. Miss the button? Go ahead, subscribe now so you don't forget later. This isn't just a story about a man who killed. It's a story about how the Hells Angels learned to weaponize silence, and how one of their own used that silence to flip the entire system from the inside. For 12 years, between 1973 and 1985, Yves Apache Trudeau operated in the background, not as a boss, not as a leader, but as the most efficient killer the Hells Angels ever had on payroll. He didn't chase reputation, he earned fear by precision. 43 confirmed murders, and no witnesses. But here's what changed everything. The Lennoxville Massacre. 5 bikers from Trudeau's own chapter were executed by their own club. He wasn't there. He was in Detox, a state-funded rehab center just outside Sherbrooke. The walls were thin, the staff were careless, and one morning he overheard something in the hallway that stopped him cold. A contract, $50,000, on his head. What do you do when the people you've protected for a decade now want you gone, when loyalty becomes a liability? That moment didn't make him guilty. It made him strategic, and the decision he made next would unravel outlaw biker networks across Canada and reach all the way into New York's organized crime circuits. Prosecutors used his intel to raid clubhouses in Sherbrooke, Sorel, and Montreal. The RCMP opened files on over 100 gang members. In New York, 2 affiliate chapters severed ties to avoid legal fallout. Because Trudeau didn't just flip, he mapped the whole operation. He gave them the names, the systems, the flow of money, the geography of power. And for the first time, the public saw what the Hells Angels looked like from the inside. And if you're still watching, here's a question worth answering in the comments. What's worse, a traitor who flicks to save himself, or a killer who stays loyal to the end? Quick reminder, if you're still watching, go ahead and subscribe. We bring you the real stories others leave out. What would you do if the people you trusted most suddenly became the threat? Would you run? Would you hide? Or would you turn them all in before they could get to you first? The answers to those questions changed the course of Canadian biker history, and Apache was the one holding the pen. Yves Trudeau was born on February 4, 1946, in Laval, Quebec. He trained as a mechanic, quiet, methodical, not much of a talker, but by the time he was 22, he wasn't fixing engines anymore. He was riding with the Popeyes. In the late 60s, Popeyes MC was one of the most feared biker gangs in Quebec, known for brutal assaults, public shootouts, and torture. They didn't care about optics. They cared about dominance. And Trudeau? He fit right in. At 5'7", stocky, clean-shaven, he didn't look like a killer. But in 1968, when he joined the club, members noticed something right away. He didn't bluff. He didn't boast. He just followed orders and never hesitated. By 1973, he carried out his first confirmed kill. A rival club member beaten to death with a pipe. No charges, no witnesses, no noise. Just silence. And results. Over the next 12 years, Trudeau developed a pattern, 1 kill at a time. 29 were shot, mostly at close range. 10 were bombed using stolen dynamite and custom wiring. 3 were bludgeoned, 1 was strangled. He chose tools based on message. Some were meant to disappear, others were meant to send a warning. And the warning worked. Inside the club he was feared, even by men twice his size. He wasn't flashy, he didn't party, he built explosives in his apartment, rode alone, and kept his name out of club photos. When the Popeyes were absorbed into the Hells Angels in 1977, Trudeau transitioned seamlessly into the Laval chapter. By then, he had already built a reputation, not as a biker, but as the guy you called when something needed to end. RCMP psychological reports from 1980s describe him as cold, compliant, and emotionally dislocated. He didn't improvise, he didn't overthink, he executed. And within the Hells Angels, that made him valuable. He wasn't questioned, he wasn't challenged. He was simply told who, when, and how. To this crew, he wasn't a member, he was a weapon. Trudeau never wanted power, he wanted instructions. Give him a name, give him a method, and he disappeared until the job was done. Within the club, he wore one of the rarest patches in the outlaw world, the Filthy Few, awarded only to members who committed confirmed kills for the Hells Angels. You didn't ask for it, you earned it, and Trudeau earned his early. In 1979, he was paid $200,000 for a single job. The bombing of Roland du Temple, a high-ranking figure in the rival Outlaws Motorcycle Club. Trudeau planted explosives under du Temple's car. The device was wired with military-grade timing, set to detonate when the ignition turned. It worked, but that wasn't his only employer. According to multiple RCMP investigations, Trudeau also took contracts from Quebec mafia cells and outlaw allies, paid for silence, not allegiance. One financial trail uncovered in Crown Court Document 87-403 shows how far his precision extended. It outlines $46,000 stolen from the Laval chapter's clubhouse, laundered clean through a string of fake mechanic invoices tied to a repair shop Trudeau used as a front. No one traced it until after his confession. What's more disturbing isn't what he did, it's how little of himself he left behind. He had no tattoos, no visible club branding, no photos with other bikers. He lived in modest apartments, never drove flashy vehicles, and never attracted press. When police finally raided his last apartment in 1985, they didn't find trophies. They found timers, spools of copper wire, blueprints for detonators, and sticks of dynamite stored in sealed toolboxes, each one labeled with a date and name. His bombs weren't random. They were measured, timed, and terrifyingly consistent. He had the discipline of a soldier and the morality of a ghost. Serge Dubois, former Quebec homicide detective. Most men in the Hells Angels wanted territory, money, fear. But Trudeau didn't want anything. He didn't speak in meetings. He didn't demand loyalty because he wasn't there to rise. He was there to remove obstacles. He didn't seek power. He eliminated it. March 24, 1985. A chalet in Lennoxville, Quebec. 5 members of the Hells Angels Laval chapter are called in for a meeting. They arrive expecting business. They're ambushed, beaten, shot, strangled, then wrapped in sleeping bags and dumped in the icy Styx River. The order came from within the club. The victims were accused of using too many drugs, drawing too much heat, and disrespecting the code. No police were involved. No outsiders knew. It was an internal cleanup, cold, calculated, and silent. But one Laval member wasn't there. Yves Trudeau. He was in detox, recovering from years of drug use at a rehab center outside Sherbrooke. For once, his isolation saved him. But within days, word got back to him. The massacre wasn't the end. A $50,000 contract had been put out on him. He didn't run. He didn't lash out. He walked quietly into a police station and asked for a meeting. There was no apology, no breakdown, just a request, immunity. In exchange for names, locations, weapons, and proof. It wasn't remorse. It was negotiation. He flipped the entire structure not out of guilt, but because he understood leverage. That moment was survival calculus. Marc Deschamps, former Crown prosecutor, Quebec Superior Court. In total, he confessed to 43 murders, named over 100 co-conspirators, linked himself to more than 90 previously unsolved homicides, and in return, he was granted full immunity. He was even paid $40,000 in cash and $35 per week for cigarettes. You're still here? Do what you meant to do earlier, subscribe. This is the part most people never hear about. He didn't crack, he calculated, and when the Hells Angels came looking for him, Trudeau handed them over before they ever got the chance. But what came next, in courtrooms, press leaks, and parole board hearings, would expose the real twist behind his so-called cooperation. And it wasn't redemption. At first, the public believed the story. A former killer, broken by the murders. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he'd finally seen too much. A man haunted by the bodies he buried. But years later, when court records and parole board transcripts were unsealed, that narrative collapsed. Because Trudeau didn't flip out of remorse. He flipped to survive. He negotiated his immunity deal before offering full cooperation. He used what he knew, names, weapons, bodies as currency. He wasn't seeking redemption. He was buying time. In closed-door meetings, he admitted to 43 murders, spanning 12 years. 100-plus co-conspirators, many still active. 90 previously unsolved homicides linked directly to club business. In return, the government gave him full legal immunity, $40,000 in compensation, $35 per week in cigarette stipends, a protected identity, and eventual release under a new name. His cooperation was complete but entirely calculated. He did not express genuine remorse. His primary motivation was to avoid targeted retribution. Parole Board of Canada, 1998. He confessed because it bought him protection. He handed over blueprints to escape a bullet, and when the media called him a repentant killer, he didn't correct them. He let the myth grow. It helped. Because as long as people believed he flipped out of guilt, they stopped asking why he was still alive. But inside the system, prosecutors knew better. So did his handlers. And so did the bikers, who now had open warrants hanging over their heads. He didn't betray the angels because he changed. He betrayed them because they failed to kill him first. In 1994, nearly a decade after confessing to 43 murders, Yves Trudeau walked free. Not as himself. The government gave him a new identity, Denis Coté. New papers, a new province, a new past. He moved across parts of Quebec and Ontario, working small repair jobs and collecting state support under witness protection. But a man like Trudeau doesn't disappear easily. He struggled with cocaine addiction, suffered episodes of depression, and for the first time, the mask started to crack. On March 16, 2004, police arrested him again, not for murder, but for something else entirely. He was charged with sexually assaulting 2 young boys, both under the age of 12. This time, there was no immunity deal. He was sentenced to 4 years, served less than that, and was quietly placed back on medical parole. By then, he was terminal. Bone marrow cancer, fast-moving, unrelenting. He died in 2008, at age 62, buried under an assumed name. No press release, no obituary, no gravestone tied to the name Yves Trudeau. Just a sealed medical record, and a legacy too large to hide. His sentence was light, but his legacy was heavier than any cell could carry. Closing remarks from the Crown during sentencing. The justice system let him walk, and in doing so, inherited what came next. A man who'd evaded death by making himself useful, only to self-destruct when no one needed him anymore. He wasn't a leader. He didn't make speeches. He didn't demand loyalty or command respect. Yves Apache Trudeau was a tool, sharpened in silence, kept on standby, unleashed when the club needed something, or someone gone. And when the Hell's Angels no longer needed him, he rewired his usefulness, turned their secrets into survival. For 12 years, he murdered on command. For 12 months, he undid them, methodically, name by name. He confessed to 43 killings, identified over 100 co-conspirators, mapped a network that prosecutors used to collapse entire biker factions across Quebec. By 1997, the fallout from his cooperation helped fuel sweeping anti-gang legislation across Canada. Wiretap powers were expanded, clubhouses were seized, and in cities like Sherbrooke, Trois-Rivières, and Ottawa, chapters folded almost overnight. But Trudeau never saw that aftermath. He never gave a second interview, never stood trial for the worst of his crimes, and never faced the families he left behind. Because ghosts don't answer questions. They vanish when their usefulness ends. He didn't wear power, he erased it. And in the end, even ghosts leave behind evidence. You've made it to the end. That tells me one thing: you care about the truth. So here's what to do next. Hit subscribe. This channel doesn't chase clicks. We chase what really happened. And the next story might be the one nobody else was willing to tell.